Hey guys, it's Falene again from Six Blue Warriors. So today I wanted to talk about occupational therapy. Now, some of you may have heard of occupational therapy, some of you may not. I run into a lot of people who've never even heard of occupational therapy. I didn't really know much about occupational therapy until we got started into it, and now I think it's a super fantastic thing. It's awesome. Occupational therapy can be used for a variety of things. Most of the time they work with small children. It has nothing to do with jobs, which is kind of what I thought, considering the first word was occupation. OT is for helping with a bunch of different deficits that your kid can have. Our kids can really benefit from occupational therapy. So that's why I wanted to do this informational video about the basics of what it is and things that you can use it for. So some of the things that an occupational therapist or an OT can work on with your child is sensory overload, which none of them have problems with sensory stuff, right? Just kidding. Sensory overload from things like touch, sight, smell, sound, any of those things. They can have ways to be able to help people working with that stuff. It's awesome. They can help your kids to work on their fine motor skills, things like doing up buttons on their clothes or using a pencil to write their name, zippers, opening jars, things that with fine motor skills, which generally kids with autism do have problems with fine motor skills. Another thing that they can help your kids with is if they're struggling with certain gross motor skills, like walking up and down stairs or hand-eye coordination, being able to kick a ball, ride a bike, those kinds of things, balance, body awareness, keeping track of where they're at so that they don't flail around and hit people as often. I know one of my sons constantly walked into corners around in the hallways. It seemed like, we weren't sure if he needed glasses or not. But I think he just wasn't aware of where he was and how close he was ending up being to the wall. So that is something that an occupational therapist can help you with as well. One of the things that my occupational therapist talked with me about for one of my kids was transitioning. That was something that he really struggled with at the beginning of the school year, is just transitioning from one activity to the next. If they were in their homeroom classroom and then they had to go to the art classroom or then they had to go to PE, he's just like, but I don't want to leave. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. So one of the ideas that the occupational therapist gave me was, he says, it really doesn't matter what it is, but you have a transition object. For example, if you just have a book or a stuffed animal or generally something heavy, because my son is a sensory seeker, and so heavy things help him to feel that comfort and reassurance more. But give him whatever it is, the book, the backpack, the flag, whatever the teacher wants to hand him, the chalkboard eraser, it doesn't matter. And then he's like, here, have Aiden take this to the next teacher that he's supposed to go to. So his teacher's like, okay, Aiden, I need you to go and give this to the librarian now. And so he knows that when he goes there, he's got a job to do now. So he's no longer focusing on the fact that he doesn't want to leave his activity. He now has a task that he needs to accomplish. So for him, he's very task oriented. He wants to be able to check things off the list so he knows that he's done. So that helped him just to forget about transitioning and to realize that he needed to get a task done. Other things that they've been able to help us with is that both of my older boys have been diagnosed with ADHD as well. And so helping them to learn to focus better, offering them things like fidget toys, which is just something for them to sit and play with and keep their hands busy while they're working. And because they've got their hands busy, it allows their mind to focus more on their schoolwork and things like that. There's these little discs that you can get, or a pillow or something that you can get to put on your child's chair so that they can still be sitting in their seat, but they can still keep that movement going. And it allows them to continue to get their work done, and there's less disruptions, and it's better for them. And a lot of times kids are just like, that's a cool toy that they get to sit on. I want one too, but they're special. They get their own. Gotta find those things to help our kids be, the standout cool ones, right? Another thing that occupational therapists can help out with is feeding problems, because sometimes our kids can be picky. I don't know if you have any problems with picky eaters, but I sure do. So one of my kids we took to go and see an occupational therapist to see if some of his feeding problems were just sensory overload for his mouth. And we realized that he also was having some difficulty with chewing. We had to sit down and explain to him how to use his teeth and which teeth he needs to use, because he was using his front teeth for everything. He wasn't using his molars to chew certain foods, which is why it was going down in bigger chunks, which is what was making him gag, which is what was giving him trouble. So he ate a lot more foods all of a sudden once we sat down and actually explained to him that he's got his cutters here at the front and he's got his chewers in the back. And then when we were trying to get him to eat stuff and we saw he was struggling a little bit, we're like, use your chewers more, just things like that. And just, like, holy cow, I never would have thought that he didn't think to use all of the teeth he had in his mouth. That's just things I don't even think about. But when you go to visit an OT, they stop and they say, I wonder if they're having a problem with this. And I'm, they're just geniuses. I need to go back to school and learn how to be an OT, and then I can be smart too. So generally, when you're seeing an OT, what it is you go once or twice a month. It depends on your kid and their needs. Some people go more regularly, but it's not a daily therapy kind of thing. It's something where you go in and they do have exercises that they work on with your kids. Usually with Aiden, they would do some sort of calming exercise where he'd get to go and swing really hard on something and jump on something really hard, and just to kind of get some of that gross motor stuff out, or reduce some of that energy. And then the OT would work on him with his handwriting, putting together some puzzles. He had some special clothes that were put together so Aiden could just work on buttons. Things like that. So they gave me ideas. They did actually work with the kids, but the whole time we'd also be talking about, okay, how's he doing this week? What's going on with him? What's he struggling with? What things have you noticed? Giving me a chance to talk to the therapist and find out new ideas for all these different things. So I, again, would just leave there feeling like light bulbs just right and left. Like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Or, I never thought of it that way. I already had this stuff. I just didn't even think about it. Those are the things that I just love, because as parents, we're constantly looking for ways to help our children, to make their lives easier, to make our lives easier, for us to understand each other better. And so when you can have a tool like an OT that can sit down and give you some answers to some of those problems, then that is just fantastic. It's a huge resource. And you don't have to do OT all the time. We did it consistently about once a month, twice a month, something like that, for about 6 or 7 months. And then Aiden was doing really well with all of the goals that we had set for that. And so he said, okay, well, if something else comes up, come back and see me. You know where we're at. But I feel like Aiden's doing really well. So the other thing that's nice is because they work with a variety of kids, and they also work with typically developing kids. It was really hard for me having 2 kids with autism right in a row, because I had no idea what is typically developing and not, because I had 2 kids who did the exact same thing. But it was not typically developing. So they were able to give me a range of, yeah, he's actually really talented with his gross motor skills, but he is struggling with these fine motor skills. Or this is something that you're going to want to pay attention for. Or he's doing just fine. Don't even worry about it. The other option that you have for getting OT services, besides going to it privately through your health insurance or just going and finding an OT, is school districts are required to offer occupational therapy services for kids in the school that meet certain criteria. And if your child has autism or has struggles with ADHD or sensory processing disorder or any of those things, they definitely qualify. Now, they may not get regular services from the occupational therapist, but you can always ask if they can have the school district's occupational therapist or the one school, come in and observe your child and give the teacher any hints or help. Like I said, it's not necessarily something that's a long term, but they definitely can come in and do kind of a consultation with you and the teacher to say, maybe the child would benefit from this, or maybe the child would benefit from this. And like I was talking about, the disc in the chair, so that the kid can kind of wobble around in the chair, but they're still sitting there working, and they're not disrupting the class by doing things like that. So that is another thing that you can do, is you can get those services through your school. They have to do testing in order to see if your child qualifies for occupational therapy services, but the school covers the cost of the testing. It's actually done at the school on the school's time. So it really isn't that big of a deal, but you do have to go through and request it. The other thing is fine motor skills. Those have to do with handwriting. The occupational therapist, one of my friends, her son had a thing to put on his desk, so it tilted the desk just slightly at a different angle, and then he was able to do his handwriting much better. Sometimes it's really simple fixes that if you can just have the OT come in and take a look for a minute, then they can just make some suggestions, make some modifications, and you don't even have to have your kid on an IEP for that. That's what falls under the Section 504 program, where it's just an accommodation made for a student that helps them to do better and progress better in school. There's a couple of different avenues for you to be able to get OT services through the school or through just a private clinic. One reason that I like doing the private clinic in addition to the school, so if you get services through the school, that's fantastic. But even if you do, I still like going through the private clinic, because the school is only required to work on things that are necessary for them to be able to be functional at school. They are not required to do anything that has to do with their day-to-day life or for them to be able to be functional at home. So for example, the buttons and the zippers and those kinds of things, they don't have to work on that. The child is supposed to show up dressed to school, but handwriting is something that's essential to school. So they'll work on that. So that's one of the reasons why I like going to a private clinic in addition to the school, because the other thing is that if I say, hey, the school's OT is recommending this, this, and this, but they're saying my son doesn't need this anymore, but we're still working on that here. A lot of times OTs are aware of what happens with an occupational therapist in the school as well, and they can give you some advice, because they do know that your child and they know the occupational therapy job. So they're a great resource to kind of pick their brain about helping with knowing that you're getting what you need from the school as well. So that way you can feel more informed about if the school wants to, say, reduce your child's services or add a service, then you will feel more educated as to why those things are happening, instead of sitting in an IEP meeting going, well, I guess they said that they need this, so, or they said they don't need it anymore, so I'm just, gonna go along with it. And then later you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done it, So that's one of the reasons, I can't know everything, so it's nice to put good people around you to be able to help you understand things that you need help with. And so that is one of the reasons why I like still doing OT privately and not just through the school. But I know that's not always an option for everyone. We have Medicaid that helps cover some of the cost for that, so cost isn't as big of an issue for us. But just because we have the Medicaid as a secondary right now, if we lose that, then cost definitely becomes an issue. But something you could do is maybe just go in for a one-time appointment to kind of ask about your specific questions, and then come back on not a regular basis, but just know that you have that OT there as a resource. So that's my information about occupational therapy. I'd be happy to know if any of you have any additional questions or anything that you'd like for me to answer for you. And like I said, occupational therapy is something that I feel is super awesome and my kids have really benefited from, and myself as well. So feel free to leave your questions down in the comment section. If there's anything that you know about that could help somebody else benefit from occupational therapy, then please feel free to leave your advice as well. So I wanted to mention that we also do have another YouTube channel that is just about our family, and it shows us going and doing just the different things in our lives, and how, wrestling with our kids and getting them out the door and trying to do stuff with them and take them out in public and trying to do all the different things that you have to do in life. So you can click on the link in the description to go check out our other YouTube channel, and it's called Chuff Blue. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this information helpful, and again, feel free to share these videos with anyone that you feel could benefit from them. I'm just trying to help reach as many people as I can. If you have any helpful comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. And if you like these videos, feel free to subscribe so that you can get notifications of when those new videos are. And if you found it helpful, feel free to leave a like down at the bottom. It makes it easier for other people to be able to find these videos as well. So thanks for watching, guys.